Okay, in this video, now that 5.3 has been released, we're going to go ahead and migrate our entire project from 5.1 to 5.3. So this is everything we've done in the abilities, inventory sections, everything we've done in the spawner videos, and anything we've done in Let's Talk About up to this point. All of that was done on 5.1. So from this point forward, all the videos will be done on 5.3. But first we have to migrate our project. And this will be a good test of our structures that we set up using the gameplay features to see that we can migrate our application relatively seamlessly to a new version. So let's jump right into it. So first, the release notes. We took a look at the 5.3 release notes, and there's an interesting note there about Shooter Explorer, including some experimental content for open world and AI, which is very timely given what we've been working on lately. So we're going to, after this video, kind of poke around and see what exactly is in there. But these are the release notes for 5.3. And then we have to look at the release notes for 5.2 to make sure we're doing everything we need to do to move from 5.1 to 5.2. And so you'll note this line to double check the Iris support. Unreal is moving all of their network to Iris as the new default networking system. So they're basically slowly migrating their code over to that. So that's now a requirement. So we got to double check that that's in our build, which it is for us. You'll also note that in 5.2 they added split screen. So you can now do split screen, which is kind of cool. And they've added some capabilities for dedicated servers, which will also be interesting for us. So based on those release notes, we're going to go ahead and push our project up to 5.3. So here's the steps that we went through, and we'll kind of walk through some of it here for you guys. First and foremost, obviously back up your project. So we made 2 complete backups just in case something went wrong and we had to revert back. Then we're going to download and build the source build for 5.3. Interestingly enough, if you look at my little list here, I had to go ahead and update my Visual Studio because there's a deprecated, some deprecated modules in there that you have to move up in order to be able to compile 5.3. So if you're having problems compiling 5.3, go ahead and update your Visual Studio and that'll likely fix it. I had to make sure I had enough disk space. So I was carrying a 503 at 250 gig and a 5.1 at 322 gig. So we made room on our hard drive to make sure we had enough. By the way, so 5.3 came in at 185 post-compile. It will obviously grow as you work with the engine and it caches more information, but sort of the post-compile up and running in the editor, we clocked in at 185. So for those of you guys that are going to do an engine build, make sure you have at least that much space, preferably a bit more. Step 3, we download the clean Lyra project from the marketplace. So we basically pulled down the 5.3 version of the Lyra project out of the marketplace, went into that folder, changed its engine to the source build engine from step 2, compiled and tested that Lyra project worked. So after the first 3 steps, we know we have a good engine build and we know we have a good functioning Lyra build. So we then turn our attention to our project, where we clean up our project folder, getting rid of all the intermediary files, the caching files, all the stuff that would be 5.1 specific. You might as well just blow it away because it'll save you some headaches and grief later on. It's just easier and better to clean up your project folder first. So we did that. Then we moved to step 5, where we moved our plugins and features from the clean project to our project. Then we went back into the C++ of our project to get it to compile, fixed a few errors there. We'll show them on screen. Flipped over the standard content folder, the Lyra game content folder from our clean project. Added back any Delta assets from our backup file. That's why you have your backup file. Then we fixed our blueprint errors and packaged. It took us a couple of runs at packaging to get all the bugs worked out. But we're at a point where we can now test a packaged client. So let's run through those steps sort of quickly, so you at least have reference of where we ran into items that you can explore on your own. So building the source engine, I'm not going to go into detail on that. You basically download from GitHub, unzip it into your chosen location. Note that the Lyra code is in the samples folder. So you actually, inside that samples folder, have a copy of the latest Lyra code as well. So we go ahead and build that engine. Then we create a clean Lyra project. So we go to the marketplace, hit the create project on Lyra. It will download, I think it was 8 or 9 gigs of data. Right-clicked our U project, changed our engine to the source build, fired up generated Visual Studio files, fired up our editor, and compiled. So that's basically just making sure everything in this folder, because we're going to be copying from this, is clean and ready to go. So that gives you your clean Lyra project. Then we go into our project and we dump the binaries, build files, intermediate files, the derived data cache, and saved. So all of these can be safely dropped as long as you keep your config, your content, your plugins, and your source. Those are your main folders. These are others that we have in the project that you may or may not have. This is our source control and our Visual Studio symbols, so we don't worry about those. And yeah, so that's basically it. So we cleaned up, getting rid of all those files, and we're in a good spot. Next, we need to go into the plugin folder. And for every plugin that was part of Lyra, we're going to want to make sure we delete it and copy over the plugin. So my recommendation is for all these ones marked here, you back them up. I always make backups just to make sure we have them. We actually didn't need any of those backups, but I would still go ahead and do it. So we backed these up, then we deleted these folders, and then we copied them from the clean project in. So that basically replaces all of these folders with the 5.3 version of those folders. And so that seemed to be the easiest way to make sure all of that content was consistent and effective. The game features, we didn't blow it away and copy it like we did these other plugins because we have our own logic in the game features. So for that, we did the exact same thing, but we don't touch ours. We did the shooter core, the shooter explorer, the maps, the tests, and the top-down arena. So we blow away those folders and then copied them from the clean Lyra project into those folders. So now we make our first attempt to compile. For us, we had 7 errors that had to be addressed. And these are basically places where we had changed base Lyra as opposed to copying it into a different game feature. So the first one over here is that the item definition has to become a primary data asset. So the item definition file, which was a U object, becomes a primary data asset. There are 3 fields that we had added to the item definition: show inventory, persist, and allow only one. So we had went into our source code, copied those back onto the Lyra definition. There were 4 cases where we had to add the Lyra game API. So if you look at the health class, it was not exposed by default. So when you add the Lyra game API, that exposes it to other modules. So in the item instance, item definition, you see it here, Lyra health and combat attributes, we had to go ahead and add those back in. That compiled fine. So once we made those changes, we got past our errors. We still had these warnings in the inventory manager. And basically this get if valid has been depreciated and replaced with get if initialized. So we just had to go into those 4 spots, change our getIfValid, and replace it with getIfInitialized, and then those 4 errors went away. So at this point, we have at least a compiled project. We have no idea if it's going to work yet, but it at least passed the compile stage. Next, we need to go in and replace the core content. This is not the content inside your plugins that we already copied over with each of the plugins. This is the main content folder of your project. So once again, we backed up the main content folder, then deleted it, replaced it from Lyra clean. And then for us, because we have splash screens, there's a folder that you just add back in called splash, and that'll allow you to have your custom splash screens if you went ahead and did that. So that basically says we threw away anything in the content folder that we might have changed over the course of these series. And it's a great test to see how many things we might have actually changed. And so that, I think, was our very next step, is to recognize what was missing. Oh, sorry, one more step. Next step is to go through each of the config INI files. And so we're doing a compare between the clean Lyra project and your project to see if Lyra has added any new INI settings in 5.3, and you will find some. So for example, this character immunity cooldown is a new gameplay cue that Lyra has added. So in this case, these are ones that we added in red, and so we just go into our INI file and we copy and paste the melee into our INI file. So we found that in the default engine, default game, default inputs, gameplay tags, and in the Windows folder on the platforms, there's a hardware cursor entry that you need to copy over as well. So basically, just kind of methodically go down, doing a compare on each of the default INI files, scan through them to make sure that anything that you want to copy over gets copied over into your file so that you have all those settings for Lyra to work effectively. You also need to do it on your U project file, which is just a text file. So if you open up U project from the clean Lyra project and your project and do a compare, you'll see that the 5.3 Lyra project adds probably another 6 or 7 engine plugins. And so you'll have to go through and copy and paste over those plugins into your U project to make sure everything goes effectively. So this is probably the most boring part of the process. But if you get this right, everything seems to work effectively. All right, so now we can finally open up the editor. So we launch the editor and start to address any blueprint problems that materialized. The first one that we got was the get item definition. And if you remember, quite a while back in the inventory series, we added the blueprint callable to that U function. So these were erroring out because we did not have blueprint callable. Go ahead and add back in blueprint callable, and those errors will disappear. Same with the make pickup template and make inventory pickup. These here, the properties were edit anywhere, but they were not blueprint read write. So we need to add in blueprint read write on the pickup template and the inventory pickup. So both of those just add blueprint read write, and the same thing on the next struct down, and then that will fix those errors. For us, we had to copy back in our keyboard icons. So if you haven't gone ahead and created a bunch of keyboard icons and updated this common input keyboard and mouse asset, for us, that's like 60 or 70 assets that we don't want to rekey again or make again. So we went in and copied those textures back in and then copied over top the common input keyboard mouse U asset so that we get our icons. That is in the UI foundation platform input keyboard and mouse folder. Totally optional. You likely don't need to do that unless you've gone ahead and customized some of those icons. All right, and then there were some miscellaneous files that had found their way into the content folder. So basically, as we tried to package, it came back and said, hey, I can't find this file for packaging. And that would trigger us to go to the backup folder, go grab the file, place it into the proper location so that we can continue packaging. Now, of these, so these are all the ones that we ended up putting in the content folder. The reason bleed was there was because of the way the damage gameplay effect was constructed. So we just chose to put bleed there. We renamed our skeleton UE4 core just so that we could remember which was which. We added the third person targeting, which we can probably move somewhere else. We added the physical material for grass and wood. I think those have to stay in content. And then all of these can move. So we added up some rocket bullets and some animations. I think all three of those we can move into one of our gameplay features. And then we added these locomotions for carrying the various weapons. Again, those can also move. So these here, we're going to move out of content so that we don't have to deal with them ever again in an upgrade. And then, we'll try to address these last ones. But this really showed us that we didn't actually change a lot of files in the content folder, which is good. Or we didn't add a lot of files, I should say, which is good. We may still come across some that we changed as we go through further testing and debugging, but that's why we have the backup, so we can always go back and look. So once we put all those files back into place, and we already talked about this, changing the item definition to the primary data asset, which is because we needed to be able to allow the item definition to be in our asset manager. So this doesn't package unless this is changed from UObject to primary data asset, and then this will all package properly. And that basically brings us to a fully packaged and ready to test client. There is one outstanding error message right now, or warning, I guess, on these meta sounds. They don't seem to cause any significant problem yet, but we are going to clean them up. But we are getting this warning message on the meta sounds that we copied over from the Lyra clean. So before we call it a complete success, we're going to want to go figure out how to either copy them over effectively or how to resolve these warnings that are left in the editor. So at this point, we basically are testing and making sure that everything is still functioning. So we're going to run through a series of tests. But those are all the steps that took us to get to a clean 5.3 project, which we'll pull up here in a moment. All right, so we're going to launch our packaged client. We do get a few errors here. They'll pop up in the corner, which we'll have to diagnose what's exactly happening there. But our login screen is presented. We're able to log in. We see that we're logged in as our player. We see we have the show replay, which is the new 5.3 capability. And we have the add player to allow us to do split screen. And then if we hit play, we can basically start a game and basically work our way through our different experiences. So there's our experiences that we've had set up in our plugins. We're going to change that to disable. We're going to launch our landscape, which is where we were last loaded. And this is where we were testing our scaling AI. And you see that at least on the surface, things appear to be working. Again, we haven't done a whole lot of testing to make sure all the feature sets have been moved over. But at an early test, things seem to be moving along okay. I can quit back to the menu. This is kind of cool. We can add a player as a guest and play, start. Let's do landscape again. Oh, I've got to take off bots. And so now we have split screen up and running from 5.3. So that's pretty cool. And we have the show replay, which I'm not sure what that does yet. But so still a few errors that are popping up, but largely we're up and running in our 5.3, and we'll just keep testing away and see what other things need to be dealt with. It looks like some networking stuff is definitely happening in the corner. Okay, and to close out the video, we took a look at the logs to see what those errors were throwing, and it looks like there are 3 errors being thrown. The first is a network connection error, which we're going to have to investigate. It's probably a setup with Iris and maybe an INI file that we forgot to copy over. The second one is in our code in the regenerate health ability, where apparently it looks like we're removing the ability, but the handle is invalid. Probably has to do with shutting down out of a match. And then the last one is also our issue in that our login button does not have an activatable widget. So the get desired focus wasn't overridden. And so when it attempts to show that, it's going to throw this error. So 2 of those are ours we're going to fix, and 1 we're going to investigate. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and everyone can upgrade to 5.3.